Hello, welcome to the next episode of Dave's Canoeing Adventures. In this one, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks into planning your next backcountry canoe trip, especially if you're a beginner. This won't encompass everything you need to know, but it's going to give you some good starters in the planning and understanding of the skills involved in your first trip. My goal in this is that I can make a series of videos that will give you more information as you go through the planning process. The act of planning your first trip can seem a little daunting, but in all reality, it isn't that hard. All that's involved is really knowing the right location, the right time, the proper gear, and an understanding of your skill set. If you know these things, you'll have a great time and you'll want to go again. I hope this video and the ones to come will help you in planning your trips and help you to have an enjoyable time in the backcountry.
A little bit of a trail here. We don't have snowshoes. Could probably still get through it, but the snowshoes help a lot. This morning it was about minus 20. Warming up though now. One thing I wanted to talk about was planning your next trip. Planning your next canoe trip. There's a lot of factors. First off, have you ever been on a canoe trip before? If it's your first one, I really would suggest that you use an outfitter of some kind. There's hundreds of them. Even if you want to do something local, like the Grand River, there's Grand Experiences, Grand River rafting. They can do day trips for you very easily. But if you're used to being in a canoe and you want to try playing your own trip out, the number one thing you got to do, you got to look into how many kilometers you can travel in a day. And that's very important. There's been many trips where we bit off more than we can chew. One trip in particular, the day was 13 hours long, and some of the guys got a little disheartened about that. A good way to learn how much distance you can travel in a day, especially in a canoe, is if you know somebody with a canoe, try to get out onto a local pond, measure it out on Google Maps or Apple Maps, and find out how long it takes you to travel it. That'll give you a good idea. And if you have to add portages to it, then you'll just have to add a lot more time. Assume you're going to double back on the portages. It's always a good plan. And then if you can single carry, you're ahead of the game.
Now that you have an idea where to look for local outfitters and backcountry outfitters, and that you have an understanding of the distances you can travel, the next step is to plan your gear. Now, much of your gear you can get from the outfitters. Let's cover some of the safety gear that I bring on my trips. The number one piece of kit I take is my first aid kit. It is customized to what I need, and I would never go out in the woods without it. Inside that kit, I like to have water purification tabs, just in case I can't start a fire or don't have access to my water filter. Remember that this is just a video of tips. You'll have to go more in depth in all the topics, and I'm not going to be touching on everything. There's a lot more you're going to have to look into and figure out as you go. With many things, it's going to be very customizable. The degree at which you want to go into the hobby is entirely up to you. I also like to make sure that somebody back home has a map of where we're going and when we're going to be there. That way, if we don't show up at the end, at least somebody knows where to come look for us. Another piece of kit that I like to take on my trips is a beacon. We use a Garmin InReach device. It has an SOS function. In the event that we have an emergency, we can hit the SOS button and it will call in the first responders. It also allows us to keep in contact with family back home during the trip. You can actually rent these devices at the outfitters. If you're not going often, renting's probably the way to go. When on the water, it is wise to follow safe boating procedures. We have all the gear that's required in the canoe and close at hand in case of an emergency. Another piece of kit that I like to keep in the canoe as a safety device is an extra paddle, especially if I'm soloing. This way, if I lose my paddle, I can grab it and get back to my old paddle quickly.
Also, a lot of good books out there that'll give you a lot of information on what you should bring, what you should wear, different gear, and generally just they give you maps, how many miles you should be doing in a day and what's easy trips. Kevin Callan, he does a really good job. I have a few of his books and we use them all the time. It's very important if it's your first trip or if you're new to camping to go in the August, early September season. Early September gets really cold at night still, but the days are great, the water's warm. The problem with July is the bugs get really bad. So, if you're not afraid of black flies, deer flies, mosquitoes, then July is not a bad time. But you also get a lot of rain in July, so the water levels are higher. So that's something else you have to watch out for.